Thank you for joining us today as we take a look at grids in business rules. Grids are a lot like lists or list views like we created in the last tutorial, except that you can change information directly in a grid, which is great in some ways but could allow users, or an office cat, to accidentally change or delete data. Visually, grids are different because they display blue grid lines instead of just the data like a list view does. To demonstrate the use of a grid, let's modify the list view program that we already made. We can change our list to a grid in 6 easy steps. First, change every keyword list to grid. The read loop remains the same, and so does the code to populate the grid. Next, change the Edit button to a Save button by replacing the word Edit with Save everywhere it's found. And change the code for when they hit the Save button from Edit List View to Save Grid. Next, we'll have to rewrite the do loop that relates to the buttons. Since grids are used for changing information, or possibly adding new information, we need to add several input fields so that it accounts for all the new information that was changed. So we'll change the first input fields to a read type of row count and a select of change, which will choose the number of rows that contained a changed element, and we'll read that into the variable num of rows. Then set the matrices row subscripts to the size of number of rows, and that's where we're going to catch the subscripts of each row in the next input field statement, which will be input fields to our grid, and this time the read type will be row sub, change, and no wait. And then we're going to read this input field's information into our matrices row subscripts, which we just set the size of. No wait is a keyword that allows us to enter several things at once because it doesn't wait for a response or click or enter from the user. And so this do loop will run when they click one button, but it will input several things all at once. Then add our 3 other matrices, mat new name to num of rows, mat new email, and mat new update. And then our third input fields will be input fields, our grid information, and then the read type row, select type change, and no wait again. And we'll read this into our 3 matrices, new name, new email, and new update. And that's the end of our loop. The code remains the same if the user hits the quit button, but we'll have to change the section now entitled Save Grid. So when they hit save, it will go to Save Grid now. We're going to use a simple for next loop. So for 1 equals n to changes, and changes equals the udim of row subscripts, which will have collected 1 row subscript for each row changed. Then let new rec equal row subscripts of n. We'll read number 1 using email form. Rec equals new rec, and once again we're going to use the blah 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 junk variables just to read the record that we want to replace. And then we're going to set 3 new variables: write name, write email, write update. And these will set a new variable, like write name, equal to the corresponding value in our matrix for this record. And I'm going to use 2 lines here to set write update to only the first letter of either instant, daily, or weekly, the same way it is in the data file. And last, we'll rewrite number 1 using email form and our new variables. Let's move email form up here so that it's always accessible. And add our next n line, and then a go to done for when it's finished. Since we've added lots of new variables, some of which are 50 characters in length, we'll have to add dim statements for all of those. So set up our new matrices and new write name, write email, write update variables. When we run our program, you can see that we can make any change. And remember, you need to click outside of the change cell to make it stick. And when we hit save, it ends the program, but to run it again, we can see the changes that we just made. Thanks for joining us today. Next up, we'll take a look at more complicated functions using grids.